For RCR TV, I'm Sean Kinney, and thank you for joining us for our Analyst Day event. We've been running streams all day trying to bring you some industry insight as we approach 2016. And in this session, I'm very happy to welcome Patrick Moorhead from Moor Insights and Strategies based right here in Austin. So Patrick, thanks for coming in, man.
Hey, thanks for having me in, Sean. You know, it's really tough getting over here. I think I traveled about 15 minutes in my car. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to a great discussion around IoT mobility today. But before we sort of get into that, I know every year your firm puts out some 2016 predictions. So I thought maybe you could share a few of those with our viewers.
Yeah, that'll be great. So, Sean, we're a full service, so we hit a lot of different areas. I run the company, and I'm an analyst, kind of like a lot of the smaller firms. But SDN, I have to talk about SDN, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest buzzwords out there for the last few years. There will be more headlines than revenue produced by SDN in 2016.
That's consistent with 2015 too, I think.
That's exactly right. Now there are areas like SD-WAN. SD-WAN has pretty much been built out, and all the shows we go to and the vendors we talk about, we believe there's going to be some consolidation. Meaning, at the end of 2016, there will actually be less vendors doing SD-WAN than are doing it today. And there's just too many of them out there right now. The other piece that we're expecting is that we believe there will be well-funded stealth startups that are going to take an embrace and extend approach to it that I think everybody has been waiting for. So it's not just, oh, I support Cisco or Juniper and HP. It's I support HP, Juniper, Cisco, Arista. Really what people are looking for. And the other thing to keep in mind here is this whole concept of composable infrastructure that's coming from the enterprise side. And telcos need to figure out how they're going to play in that environment there. And which brings us to NFV. So a lot of virtual customer premises proof of concepts, okay? And I think the whole proprietary notion of NFV is not going to happen, and you're going to see everybody really focusing on open flow, open NFV-based implementations. Now, I don't feel like that's too big of a stretch. When it comes to vendors in that area, you know, HPE and Dell are strong because they have a lot less to lose than the incumbents in there. Quick thing about industrial IoT, but I know we're going to jump into that. So, end-to-end encryption is going to be the norm. Okay, all this discussion of do I need all that horsepower or don't I need all that horsepower? M2M decisions may have been made by maybe the general manager or even the manager level. Big industrial IoT decisions are going to be made by and approved by the CEO and the board. And with all the CEOs getting fired now and being held liable for security, really, we're all going to be there by the end of the year. Everything's encrypted end to end, even no matter how basic there is. The second thing is we track about 150 different industrial IoT software platform makers. Not a big stretch here. We're going to see some consolidation in the end of the year. You're going to see a spike up until the bit, and then they're just going to start going away. You know, big guys like Blue Pillar, Ayla, Zebra, you know, Blue Mix from IBM. They're going to be hanging in there, but they're going to be a lot less that started at the beginning than at the end. 5G, interesting. So, which I'm sure the telco-minded people who track 3GPP clearly know that what Verizon is talking about with 5G is not 5G. But you're gonna keep seeing the U.S. telcos beating the drum, saying that they have 5G that's not 5G, in a very similar way that they talk about having 4G when they didn't actually have 4G.
It's marketing.
It's marketing. The madness has to stop somewhere. But you're going to see a lot more of that, but you're also going to see a lot more deployments real value add, an LTE Advanced Pro, which essentially Verizon's calling 5G.
Yeah, I've heard that referred to as 4.5G, I think out of some of the South Korean telcos, but incremental advancements along the way to 5G, right? And before we do IoT, can I ask you to circle back to that SDN NFV prediction?
Sure.
You know, all year in 2015, adoption's coming any day now. We're going to start seeing some big uptake from carriers, and I know that's a tricky proposition because it's expensive and it's hard to integrate new platforms with your legacy platforms. But what is the runway for adoption from your perspective for carriers integrating these solutions? Yeah,
so SDN was the Where's Waldo of technology, and the biggest issue is scale. Okay, SDN was just not able to scale in the dimensions that telcos needed it to. Now it's become a requirement, and one of the biggest because quite frankly, as they start to build out their data center or cloud opportunities, they have people like Google who've been using SDN forever. Okay, where it's a completely composable infrastructure, and so now it becomes they have to do it. Okay, and finally, even the most locked-in vendors, hardened vendors who wouldn't be open to SDN, are open to SDN. There are more SDN standards, and I think from an open standard standpoint, we finally found we're finally seeing a gelling of those standards. So I think we will see some small deployments of SDN, but nowhere near the deployments we would need to support 5G. Because when you think of 5G, it requires a composable network that switches on the fly, that moves around, characterizes the needs, and moves bandwidth and capabilities where it's required. You can't do a good 5G without fully composable, a software-defined network.
Yeah, I think that's a really lucid point, Patrick, as we talk about 5G maybe in the 2020, 2022 time period, and when people ask me what's the runway on SDN and FE, I say, well, I don't really know, but it's definitely going to be there before 5G is commercialized because it has to be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the on-ramp to those 5G services is NFV, and the ability to get there and full version 15 will be there and ratified in 2018. You'll start to see true full 5G implementations. So you really have to have an SDN, and to get the services out, you have to have NFV.
All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about IoT. This is a huge buzzword right now. 50 billion connected people and objects by 2020 is one of the going figures out there. And we can talk a little bit about consumer and a little bit about industrial. Let's start with consumer. I noticed that you're wearing not one, but two devices there.
It's kind of ridiculous. And we do have a consumer practice. And to me, our goal is to figure out when we really see a peak on the consumer side, which one aspect of that is wearables, and the other is home automation, which I want to talk about as well. And I think the Apple Watch, which is on my left wrist and the camera's right, took out a lot of those objections. Okay, it's not necessarily geeky. There are some things, the annoyance factor that it takes away, and you also have on the carrier side, you have twinning, and now you have new services like AT&T just rolled out today with the Samsung S2, which essentially gives you your phone number. You can actually make calls without actually having a modem in here, and it's leveraging your same number. So that, in addition to older style watches getting smart, I think we're looking at a 50% break even probably in 3 to 5 years. So it's nothing that's going to happen soon, because quite frankly, you're not wearing something on your wrist, which a lot of people don't. And then the question becomes, I'm not on the fence that says those people who don't have watches today won't ever wear them. We just have to give people like you a better reason to do that.
And I think this is sort of speaking as me being a consumer, I think the form factors, they're great. That's not the issue. I need a more valuable service before I'm going to take the plunge and really go for wearables.
Yeah, I mean today, so for instance, HealthKit's really good from Apple in that it pulls everything in, but we're not yet to the point where it's like, okay, I have my Y-thing scale, I have my basis peak when I sleep, and then I have this when I'm doing most of the exercise. Now what? Now what should I be doing?
Yeah, and to me, this is a huge challenge. You mentioned smart home, and I think that's a great example of consumer IoT, and we've started to see adoption of that too. But I'm waiting for the correlation to be able to do these really interesting things, like have my Garmin running watch talk to my learning thermostat and maybe see if the ambient temperature overnight somehow affects my mile time. And that's just not really possible right now because they produce all the data, but it just lives next to the device, and there's no sort of ecosystem for all of it to come together.
Well, right now we're in home automation standards hell, okay? But home automation standards is following the playbook that all standards go through, which is I have no standards and it's chaos, and that was kind of X10 20 years ago, right? Now we're in this, Apple has their camp, Android has their camp along with Nest. There's an open camp, and then there's the device manufacturers who are picking which one, sometimes both, to go into. But that's the bad news. But the good news is, though, is things like Apple's HomeKit, you can have a fully integrated experience that doesn't necessarily require an expert to come out. AT&T, I think, with their home automation services has actually hit one of the nails on the head, which is, hey, let us take all those issues away from you. Okay, we're going to come in, you don't know a lot about the tech, but you know you want the temperature to automatically go down when you leave the house. You want the lights to turn on when I get home. It's integrated with my security system. And I think that those two things will play against each other for the next 3 to 5 years. We will not see takeoff, okay? I mean, the hockey stick until we get this standards mess figured out. And literally every device that you buy, you know it will work in your home regardless of whether you've picked Apple, Google, AT&T, Lowe's, or even kind of the do-it-yourself. But we're 2 turns of the crank away from that before the industry says, gosh, we can't figure out why this home automation thing isn't, we're not hitting 30, 40% penetration. And for the sake of growth, people will decide that they need to work with each other.
Yeah. Well, I think Digital Life, the AT&T smart home product suite is a good example. We have some of them in this room here, but it's door locks, thermostats, lighting, and then they have a water meter consumption sensor thing.
Right.
Where do you go after that, though? I lack the creativity, but what else can you really do in a house that's captivating enough to a consumer and useful enough to have them pay for it?
So the good news about AT&T strategy is that they picked the ones that required the biggest amount of trust, and also the biggest amount of liability, which was any time you touch the security system, you're getting into a big deal, and there's a lot of liability that goes with the water tester as well. I think where it goes is in expanded in your lighting, where every light in your house becomes can be turned on and off in 2 different ways. One, in a physical way, and secondly, through your watch or your smartphone or a wireless panel. I see that as big upside for them, and ironically, the Trojan horse in industrial IoT is in lighting. And there's no reason that you can't put, for instance, that you won't start seeing wireless hotspots that will come in lights that you can plug in. Entertainment. AT&T hasn't connected any of the entertainment systems to kind of what you do in your life when as it's connected to the lighting, connected to the security system, connected to the monitoring of kind of who's who's watching what. But I like where they started. They're no-brainers, and I think that what AT&T is doing is really good.
All right, and so when we talk about all of these connected devices and objects that have a cellular connection and are producing data, that costs money. So as it stands right now, the way service providers price data, I don't know that I'd be inclined to purchase my toaster or my sneakers a cellular data plan. So as we see IoT adoption become more and more pervasive, what do you expect on that business model side? Are they going to have to restructure how they sell data?
They're going to have to restructure it in a similar way that I think when we keep getting back to AT&T, but when AT&T did the all-you-can-eat plans, and it's like, gulp, let's get some indigestion around the time we get to LTE, they're going to have to restructure it in the same way. Now, given the experience that they had on that, I think they're being a little bit smarter as they're entering it, as, let's say, much easier add-ons. I think, like a gas tank, you're always going to have a peak somewhere where you have to stop. You're going to have a speed limit, and that's just life. Now, if I look at the American psyche and psychology, there are some people who are just going to want to, just give me everything. The good news, though, is that the data density of most all of that data, with the exception of video, is pretty small. Right? I mean, you literally have bits of data, not bytes, actually bytes of data technically. You have small bytes of data telling you that your basement is wet. It's not like you're pumping out high def or 4K video.
Right.
Video is the big killer, right? And one of the biggest ways that the industry is going to try to minimize that amount of wireless piece is to have more edge computing. Okay, and there's a lot of people fighting for where that communications would take place. So instead of sending up to the network every single heartbeat that I have, heartbeat of the house, everything that's going on, it just sends up where it's in a state that it needs to be alerted.
Yeah.
Okay, and that intelligence can be in the set-top box. Their Apple TV has a play in this. I know the PC has a play in this as well, but that's a to be determined area that's going to be fought for.
Yeah, I've always been really interested in those water sensing IoT applications because we talk so much about the transformative power of IoT. What does that exactly mean? Well, consider if your water heater springs a leak, the sensor picks that up immediately, shuts the water off. If everybody has that, what does that mean for the State Farms of the world that sell home insurance? That's the transformative power of IoT. Is it's going to totally shift sort of the industry segments that we see in how they interact with one another.
Yeah, that's true. In the same way that over time we're going to see the Fitbits and the Apple Watches of the world factor into our life insurance.
That's right.
And the plug-in module in the insurance as it relates to how you drive your car, we're going to have a lot more data and a lot more real time. And as we saw with before we started charging more for smokers for life insurance, the smokers aren't going to like it, but the people who don't smoke are really going to like it a lot. There's going to be authentication and authenticity of the owner comes into play in a big way, and this is how biometrics comes into it. So for instance, who's actually living in this house? Are they renters, right? You said you had 5 people in your family. You have 30 people who come over into the house. Is it really just a place where all the fraternity brothers are living instead? I may need to increase your rate. So we're going to have a situation where the more data that we provide, the bigger benefits or detriment we're going to get back, and privacy and security are 2 elements that overshadow that whole conversation. But we see it happening today, and I see past history as it relates to factoring that goes into these. So I think that's the same path we're going to see with the digital home.
So let's talk a little bit about industrial IoT. I mean, the business case is crystal clear. Things like smart lighting and garbage monitoring. I mean, that has a direct impact on your bottom line, your operational expense. What do you foresee adoption in the industrial space trending in 2016?
Yeah, so first of all, industrial IoT financially in the next 5 years is 2 to 3 times that on what we call the human IoT. Okay, and what we see today is that it's very verticalized. Okay, whether it's retail, transportation, healthcare, and it's about hard savings. You have people rolling out solutions today. I got a chance when I was in New York City to talk to one of the largest building developers and renters in New York City. And by this gentleman connecting the turnstile to the HVAC to the power systems, he saved $1 million per building per month. Okay, so you're getting into
that's amazing.
Yeah, and so what you're getting into here is you will be having a lot more people doing proof of concept, actually going to market. The platform providers, I think many will die off at the end of the year, and what you're going to start seeing is some of these horizontal plays coming out. Arms embed, as an example, as a horizontal play that you can apply vertically. You're going to see a lot more of those plays.
You mentioned in your predictions right at the onset here that end-to-end encryption. I gotta assume that for when we talk about transportation and oil and gas and IoT applications like that, that's got to be front and center when you're considering a deployment.
Absolutely, and my point was even in those areas where you don't think it's an issue. Like, why should I spend the money to encrypt the data whether I have a water leak in my industrial basement, right? The reason is you can spoof it, right? I can mess with it. And at the end of the day, if people were in the M2M world, if you had to pay an extra dollar for the functionality, it was way overpriced.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about CEOs involved and held liable. They're going to pay the extra dollar or two to get the encryption in there.
All right, well, they're giving me the high sign off camera here, Patrick, but I really appreciate you coming in and sharing all your insight. And for the folks at home that want to keep up with more insights and strategies, what's the website?
Website is www.moorinsightsstrategy.com, and Twitter is probably the best way to find me, at Patrick Moorhead or at Moorinsstrat, and you get all of our stuff.
All right, well, thanks again, Patrick. We really appreciate it. And the folks at home, stay tuned. We've got Stephanie Atkinson coming up next.